We do have a question. What would you each do about clients who seem to have analysis paralysis or the kind of addiction to planning for its own sake? This might be more common in the not-for-profit world, but for those who've run into it, I'm sure they could benefit from your approaches.
Well, I'll take a crack at the first part and say that it is not only a nonprofit problem. Many companies suffer from this. So obviously I'm a proponent of planning, but you're right, this can go to a point where all you do is plan and you never take action, which is why in the framework that I showed you, execution is such an important part of it, right? So two things that I'll say is, number one, you need to make sure that the vision is understood. Some companies are just very risk averse, right? That's the culture of the company. That's who they are. So if you have people that are trying to put a plan in place that is accessing more money and a little more risky, whatever else, but the company's vision is not in line with that, then there's going to be a natural conflict there, right? So that could be problem number one. But problem number two is you have to make sure that no matter what your plan is, that eventually you get to the execution phase, which means that part of your plan has to be, how are we going to execute this? Not just analyzing it, but what are we going to need to actually get it done? And for that, I would say you need to lay out very clearly, what is it going to cost? What are the investments you need? What resources do you need? And what results are you going to get from that? That's going to help to bring the plan to life, or not. I mean, if the company disagrees with those things, then obviously it's not going to come to life, but you'll have no chance of getting to the execution stage if you haven't clearly laid out exactly what's going to be required to get there. So that's the biggest, advice that I would have.
Yeah. And I would build on that and just say, one of the phrases people will use all the time is ready, aim, fire. And that sequence is important. It's important that in this day and age that you don't think that one shot is going to hit the bullseye, but rather use the ideas of minimum viable product and rapid prototyping and try little steps so that you're getting good feedback about what's working as you're moving along. Going back to learning to walk, it's not like a small child falls down and stays down and says, well, maybe tomorrow. I mean, they're constantly trying to get right back up and seeing, well, all right, now, how is that going to work for me? And that's really what you want to be doing so you don't get stuck in the paralysis by analysis. That's not going to help.
Thank you. Question about metrics. Any advice for getting to agreement on the numbers to look at to tell if you're headed in the right direction?
Yeah, I'll take a crack at this one first too. So yeah, metrics is key. When I talked in my piece about the difference between vision and goals, right? I said that goals were a more granular form of that. The goals is kind of where you're going to break down into the metrics. So the way that you do the metric piece is you start with the high level goals. What are the milestones that I want to achieve? And then you break that down into what we'll call objectives. There's actually a difference between goals and objectives from the textbook, right? Most people use them synonymously, but goals are kind of your higher level milestones that you want to achieve. For example, I want to be a doctor, right? I don't, but let's say that that would be a goal. But the objective that goes along with that is how are you going to measure that, right? What are the measurable things that you want to achieve? So I want to get a PhD within 8 years and then get a job in whatever industry at this salary, right? Those are objectives that would allow you to tie with that goal. So it starts with making sure you have your goals laid out. And then you can put together objectives that allow you to measure those goals. That's where your metrics are going to come from. If you do it that way, there shouldn't be a whole lot of disagreement. The other thing that I'll add to this is there's a concept that's been around for a very long time called the balanced scorecard. It's been in use by large corporations for many, many years now. But essentially what that does is it encourages you to look at metrics that are not just financially based. So you're looking at metrics in 4 basic categories, but essentially they're not just financial metrics. And that helps you to think about things like customer satisfaction and, net promoter scores and, market share metrics, things that aren't just, revenue, profit and things of that nature. So both of those things I think could help with the metric piece. Dan, anything?
Well, just in a basic principle, that which can be measured can be improved. So you've got to understand what you're looking at so you can understand how we're making progress against that. And balanced scorecard, I think, is an excellent tool. And there's also, if you're having trouble with measurements of things that aren't typically measured, some of the stuff that I teach is based on how to measure anything, valuing intangibles. And valuing intangibles is what a lot of organizations struggle with, but it can be looked at very easily as long as you understand why are you interested in measuring that. For example, let's say I'm a curator at an art museum and I have an opportunity to buy a piece of art. Well, what makes art beautiful? Well, it depends on what the curator's looking for, right? If they're looking for something that's going to bring in a whole lot of people to see the exhibit and maybe attract donors, well, then they'd look at, well, what did the last couple of pieces of art sell for? And how many donors did they bring in? How many members did they bring in? Now, you and I may not say that that piece of art is beautiful, but in terms of why they were interested in measuring it was to get some members and to get a lot of people attending the exhibit. That is how you look at how do you measure something.
Thank you. Gavin had a comment about running multiple experiments at the same time for faster learning. Gavin, do you want to jump in and talk about that?
Yeah, kind of what I was thinking about what both of these guys have been saying, and you know, Bob was sort of saying, okay, you know, have your vision, have a plan, and then when you get out there, things are going to be different. And then Dan is sort of saying, okay, you know, how are we going to think about how things are different? And then I guess because what we're going to do is going to come back and touch base on the plan and say, okay, so based on where, you know, what our vision was and what we thought we were going to be doing and now what's actually happening, how, you know, what should our response be and have a logical response to that. I guess one of my sort of things then is what if you know, because one of the things I would do is run multiple experiments at the same time and then come back and use that extra new data to try to refine it a little bit more.
Yeah, I'll respond to that a little bit. So one of the things that I didn't bring up here is in the area that I talk about actions, right? There's actually several different layers to that as well. Just like there's layers to goals and objectives, there's layers to actions. And a lot of people will talk to strategies and tactics, right? So the strategies are kind of the overarching big things you want to do. I want to be a fast follower in this marketplace, or I want to be, you know, a leader in this type of technology or something like that. And then your actions are, your tactics beneath that are all the different things that you're going to do to accomplish that. So if companies are doing these experiments, normally I would say they're more at that, what I would consider that tactical level, right? Because it's really expensive to do experiments on the big stuff, right? Yeah. Like it would be hard to say, well, I want to be both a fast follower and I want to be, you know, a leader in this. That's big investments that can't really go on at the same time. So I think that's why these layers are important. So if you have kind of your overarching strategy, then at the tactical level, you can certainly run those multiple experiments and see which things work without having to wait, right, to see one fail. So I think that's the way I would approach that.
I think the key is if speed is the need, you have to understand what's the risk of doing multiple experiments. Because if you do too many things at once, you won't be able to reach the valid conclusion. What I would recommend is line up your different hypotheses, test one, evaluate, then go to the next one. That way you have a clean experimental field. You know, certainly if you've taken any statistics, and it's been a long time since I have, there are ways to do multi-factor experiments, but in most of the business situations, you're not going to have the data for that. I would do the A-B comparison, but have a lot of the ideas lined up so you can test them in sequence, and you'll get that rapid information. I did some work prototyping. It was an amazing situation with an outside firm. They were able to do A/B testing on a website faster than I could get approval for the spending on it when I was an internal consultant. And that's the kind of speed you're looking for. And they were able to run like 6 experiments in about 5 days. That's the kind of speed, and yet each experiment was separate on a single occurrence, and then we understood what was going to work and what didn't.
That's helpful context. All right, George has had his digital hand up for a while, asking about how do we help consumers and employees feel comfortable with the decisions they have to make, the kind of trade-offs? Should I come back to work or remain claiming unemployment? Is it better not to go to work while my colleagues go to work? Should I go out to eat at a restaurant or stay home? Kind of looking at planning as a way to build a valid rationale, I guess, that keeps you settled with your decisions.
Just a quick comment. So first, congratulations. I think that all the work that you guys are doing is real good. But ideally, if you could help me do it in a way that when I talk to people, I can help them make a decision and for them to feel comfortable. That's what I would like to learn.
So, Joy, it's a great question. And I think what it really talks to is back to the vision, right? You have to understand and know what your company stands for, the type of employees that you want to have, the type of culture you want to have, the type of customers you want to serve. And we're already seeing this start to play out a little bit, right? There are those shops that are comfortable being open during this. There are consumers that want to go to shops during this. They're not necessarily as afraid or whatever else. And there are other people that are like, no, look, I want to stay inside. I want to do whatever. And when all the smoke clears, those different cultures are going to become even more and more clear. I think your strategy can address this by saying, what kind of company do I want to have? What kind of customers do I want to serve? Make that very clear. And then put that into your plan. That way you're going to attract the type of employees that will want to work for that type of culture. You're going to attract the type of customers that you want to serve. And I think those things will naturally work themselves out. Where it won't work itself out is when companies try and be opportunistic, right? We want to open up, we want to make money wherever it's coming from, right? And I don't care who I serve. So then you start sending mixed messages. And I think that's where things will start to backfire.
I agree with everything Bob said. And, taking it from the other side as an individual, we probably aren't going to personally develop a vision and the 4 layers that Bob had on paper, but we have them intuitively and intrinsically to ourselves. And so you want to understand, how do I feel and where do I fit in on this? Now, George, you asked a couple of questions that are a bit binary. So you have, should I come back to work or remain claiming unemployment? So when you have a binary decision, it's yes or no. There's not really much middle ground. You can't be halfway in. If there is, that's the best answer if you can pull that off. But so when you're doing yes and no that are strictly yes and no, there are downsides to each part of it. And what you want to do is think through, what downside do I feel more comfortable with?
As a consultant, and this is sure something that's on a lot of people's minds, about getting enough buy-in to really be able to move the organization forward.
There are consultants out there that their theory is to work with only the executive level, right? So if they form relationships with the executive level, they get in with the CEOs and the C-level people, then that's all they need to do, right? And then those people are going to push them down through the organization and kind of push their business down. I absolutely do not work that way. I believe that the way to get buy-in in an organization is to get buy-in from the entire organization, right? It takes work. I mean, it takes work. You have to get buy-in from the top of the organization, the middle, and everything in between. And so if you don't get everyone engaged and everyone on board, feeling like they're a part of the planning process, feeling like they're a part of the strategy, then the strategies just won't have legs long term.
Yeah, I agree with everything Bob said. And there's an old Dilbert cartoon where Dogbert says, "Ooh, I like to con people and I like to insult people. Maybe I'll be a consultant." And I think that's a problem with the word consultant, is that everyone gets to use it, but not everyone is good at it. And so the term trusted advisor, thought partner, those are phrases that I like to use. And if you're going to be a trusted advisor, you have to work to build trust. And trust is a two-way street. It's an ongoing activity. And Bob's exactly right. You can't just have trust at the top and then everyone down below says, I don't trust that guy. You've got to work to build trust every day, every way, everywhere, with everybody.
And I think we are at the top of the hour. So I'm very grateful for Bob and Dan. I really like the way you two tag teamed that. It's great to see. Grateful for your time today and for everybody else that dialed in. And we look forward to seeing you next week. And remember, stay positive and test negative. Thank you. We'll see you next time.
Bye, everyone.
Great tag teaming, guys.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks, guys.